Hello everyone, it's the end of February here at Holloway and it is the end of Black History Month. Today, Mr. Spurlock, together, he and I are your History Department. Well, Mr. Spurlock, it's not only the end of February, but it's also Gray Holloway Hoodie Day, isn't it?
Absolutely, and I've had such a good time learning about these new figures of Black History Month and sharing them with the students on YouTube. It's been a blast.
It's been fantastic. We've seen Annie Marie Turnbow, we've seen Langston Hughes. Who do we have today? Robert Smalls?
Robert Smalls, he's actually an interesting character. In order to study him, you have to go back to the very beginning of American history, around like the Civil War times, so real early on. He was actually someone who fought in the war.
He was a first mate on a ship.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think, if I remember right, he captured a Confederate ship.
Single-handedly, it was at night, most of the soldiers were away, he steered the ship out into the harbor where it allowed it to be captured by the Union forces.
USS Planter, if I remember correctly.
The CSS Planter, the Confederate States.
Absolutely.
Yes.
But very interesting guy. I love his story. Let's take a look at the video that we found.
Absolutely.
And we'll be wrapping up Black History Month.
Thank you so much.
This is the story of Robert Smalls, a man who was born a slave and went on to hold one of the highest positions in government and become a hero of the Civil War. Robert Smalls was born into slavery in South Carolina. Back then, if a slave had enough money, they could literally buy their freedom. But Smalls wanted to buy the freedom of his whole family, a price that was more than he could afford. In 1862, while working close to northern lines on a Confederate boat called the CSS Planter, Smalls hatched a plan. One night, when the white officers left the ship, Smalls was left in charge. With no time to spare, Smalls took over the ship, rounded up the other slaves and their families, and set sail towards Union waters. But Smalls and his crew would have to pass through 4 Confederate checkpoints before they would be free. Smalls disguised himself by wearing the captain's jacket and straw hat and mimicking his gait. Having worked on the CSS Planter for years, he knew all of the hand signals used by Confederate sailors to pass through checkpoints. The boat passed 1, 2, and 3 checkpoints. At the final point, which was also the most heavily armed, Smalls flashed a signal and got the go-ahead. And just like that, Robert Smalls and his family literally sailed to freedom. Towards the end of his life, Smalls returned to the house in which he was born a slave, buying it outright from his former slave master to live out his days. A man who went from slave to one of the most prominent figures in America.
Thank you.